Hey, what is up, mortals? It's me, Dylan, here with a new video for you. Welcome to part 2 of What If Dabi and Shoto Switch Places. I just wanted to greet you guys by just saying, sit back and relax. You're in for a treat. So, we begin. Continuing from part 1, a brief time skip would happen. Time for Dabi to awaken from his coma. After a few months, Dabi would awaken from his coma and find flowers, get well cards among other trinkets around his bed. His family wasn't there, however. Looking out of the nearby window, he saw nothing but darkness. Seems it was pretty late, all things considered. Raising his left arm to his face, he'd run his eyes and exhale through his nose. He didn't have any clue how long he'd been out for. He just remembered a blue fire everywhere in his jaw. He'd reach up and grasp his lower jaw. It was burned and mangled. The skin seared several pitches darker than before. He blinked twice as he slowly tried to sit up, only to let out a pained gasp from his injuries. He'd look around his head. In hospital, there were buttons someone could press to call some sort of nurse. After giving it a quick press, he waited for a few moments before the doors to the room opened, and a traditional nurse stepped into the room. He'd look up to her, meeting her eyes before speaking in a pained tone of voice. "How long was I asleep for?" he asked while reaching over to grasp her arm, closest to his bed. She'd shuffle away, not allowing him to touch her. He frowned. But given that he was here because he'd lost control of his fire quirk, it makes sense that she'd rather he keeps those hands to himself. She'd move around the bed and make her way to the front of his bed and grab the clipboard hanging there. Flipping it over, she looked down at him and cleared her throat. "Toya Todoroki, you arrived here roughly 8 years ago." He was stunned. He looked down at his arms and body, checking over the various objects littering the room. There was an absurd gap. So much time had passed, all within the blink of an eye. He'd fall back into the bed and let out a pained groan as he landed. He tilted his head slightly and asked, "Can you contact my family?" She'd nod and disappear, allowing him to take a few moments to absorb his situation. He'd lay back down, remembering what his mother had told him all those years ago. "You still want to be your hero, don't you?" At time. Before we get back to the video, I'd like to talk about our new channel, Celestia, our channel dedicated to all things Dungeons & Dragons. Currently, we have a series breaking down the different spells in D&D, and soon we'll be starting some new series as well. So if you're a fan of D&D, or have an interest in learning about it, check it out. Additionally, if there is something you've always wanted to see get made into a video, head over there and leave a comment mentioning it. Those words echoing in his mind before he fell back to sleep. That night, Enji was out, dealing with some villains attacking local citizens. Rather, Ray came down to answer the phone. She'd gasp as she was informed about her son's recovery and get on her cell phone, attempting to reach the other members of her family to tell them the good news. It was late enough where nobody was able to go see him straight away, but would plan on it come morning time. She'd leave as soon as she received the news, rushing out to her car and driving to the hospital, ready to speak to her son for the first time in years. Upon arriving at the scene, she looked over her son, who had fallen back asleep, and moved over to the side of the bed and sat by his side for the remainder of the night, sending message after message to her husband, who was nowhere to be seen that night. While he might have been handling serious business in the form of various villains or saving the lives of civilians, it didn't change the fact that he wouldn't be here with him tonight. Morning came, and Toya woke up to the sight of his mother, slumped back in a chair nearby, sleeping with his siblings sitting beside her, on their phones tapping away. He'd blink once and then twice, half expecting them to disappear, as reality would fade away into some sort of dream. But thankfully, he wasn't dreaming. His family was here, save Shoto and Enji. He'd slowly grown as he rose up, sitting up as a way of announcing himself to his waiting family members. He'd smile a pained smile back at his two siblings, who quickly looked up and smiled wildly at their brother. "Hey guys." He'd mutter out quietly enough as to not wake their mother, who stirred ever so slightly when he spoke, only for Natsuo to rush over to his brother's side and embrace him. The sound of his feet shuffling across the ground, as well as the sudden takeoff, causing his mother to awaken from her nap. "Toya, it's so nice to see you again." "Ow! Hey, don't grab me so tightly." "Oh yeah. Sorry. It's just great to see you again." "We weren't sure if you'd ever wake up." Natsuru released Toya as Fuyumi spoke up, smiling widely as Rei slowly got to her feet and moved over to gently embrace her son, tears running down her face as she pulled him. She let out a pained exhale. Her throat felt so tight, it felt almost impossible for her to breathe. Toya embraced her as well, and the two sat in silence for a good minute with nothing but the quiet sobs of Rei in their ears. Toya embraced her as well, and the two sat in silence for a good minute with nothing but the quiet sobs of Rei in their ears. Once finally finished, she'd pull away and reach for a nearby box of tissues, using it to wipe her eyes as she muttered, "I'm sorry. Me, your father. We're both so sorry. We're both so sorry." Truthfully, it made a lot of sense why she was apologizing. Toya understood that maybe she would be blaming herself for his injuries and be sorely placing all of that burden on her shoulders. Enji, being sorry for what happened, felt alien to Toya. Thinking back, the last thing he remembered before he passed out on that mountainside was exactly those words. His father muttering an apology to his son, something that seemed out of character for someone as cold and heartless as Enji often was. Toya shook his head and tried to console his mother. "Please, don't be. I put myself in this situation. I just need to keep training and..." "Wait, you still want to train as a hero? You nearly died last time." His siblings blurted out to him, and they weren't wrong in their statements, it seemed. Insane that anyone would still try and chase his dream, becoming a hero in spite of these injuries, and that mountainside fire. He'd nod his head as his answer to his sister. She'd shake her head, disapproving of the choice. When Natsuo attempted to speak again, Rei spoke instead. "You need to speak about that with your father." "I was going to ask, but where is he?" "Last night he had to take care of villains on the other side of the city. Apparently there was a recent report about a slime monster attacking kids, which means he might be..."
"He might be what?"
Enji arrived. In his hero attire, surprisingly enough, he made his way towards his son, seated down on the hospital bed, and looked down at him, a touch of scorn on his expression as he tilted his head towards his scarred and battered son.
"I only got around to checking my phone about half an hour ago. After leaving those thugs to the authorities, I made my way here, ignoring the call about the slime villain. Now then."
He extended his hand to Toya's face and tapped at his scarred jaw and shook his head, letting out an annoyed as he moved his hand down to grasp his arm.
"These burns are the result of you not knowing how to lower the intense heat of your flames. Something I should have taught you when you were much younger."
"Yeah, I was trying to impress you by getting stronger, you know."
Does that mean you don't want to be a hero anymore?"
Silence filled the room. The tension was laid on thick. Being able to say what he said to his mother and siblings was slightly different to asking it to Endeavor's face. Toya let out a pained exhale and simply nodded again. "I do! I want to be a hero!"
"Fine. If you want it so badly, I might be able to get a waiver to allow you into UA, in spite of the obvious age gap."
You'd allow that?"
"Why wouldn't I?"
His angered gaze turned back to Rei, who lowered her head, figuring that even if she didn't have the heart to stop her son from continuing down this path, perhaps her husband would. But upon seeing him completely shoot down the idea of stopping him, she simply nodded her head, while Toya sat there in complete silence.
"You'll be released from here in 3 days' time. At that time, the doctors will take you to physical therapy. Once you recover, we can begin properly training you for UA, control over temperature, along with the information you'll need to study to pass the waiver exam. But make no mistake." Endeavor would stand upright, releasing Toya's arm as he glared down to him. "This summer will be the most intense training you will ever experience. You will need to adapt to every challenge and excel. The other students might have been training for their entire lives to gain entrance to this school. and will go through a difficult entrance exam involving dangerous combat. Combat you will be skipping entirely. To make up for that gap, I plan to train you until you could easily complete what they will be going through 10 times over. Once he gave his warning, he extended his hand down to his son, his glare remaining over his face. Figuring that either Toya could replace Shoto and Sama become the #1 hero with some extensive training, or that Toya would simply quit. Either way, he waited for Toya's answer, and after a brief delay, Toya grabbed his father's hand and shook on it.
I'll see you when I leave here then.
Fine. Everybody, we are leaving. We need to set up a space at home for Toya's training. Come along now. Endeavor left, expecting the family to follow, and after a few more hugs from each member, they'd all follow suit, leaving Toya alone with his cell phone and his thoughts. A summer of training with the #2 hero. His father Endeavor? It was almost a dream come true, if not for how difficult it sounded from the get-go. Meanwhile, the #1 hero was in the process of choosing his successor, placing Toya and Shoto on very similar paths heading into the summer. Thank you all for indulging yourselves in all this information thus far. I hope you enjoyed it. Now, there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. Firstly, if you're in the mood for some great storytelling, We the Celestials has got you covered. Our We the Celestials, My Hero Academia, and Naruto What If channels retell the story of their namesake anime with a twist. Check it out if you're interested. Secondly, on behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details can be found in the description below. Lastly, if you're interested in what we do here at We the Celestials, then I'd like to extend you an invitation to join the team. The only caveat being that we only accept members from 16 years and up to join our crew. You can sign up for whichever category fulfills your interests by joining the recruitment Discord using the link in the description below. We're always looking for members to join us. Well, that's it from us for today's video. So thank you all for watching, and have a great day.